Welcome to the Deep Dive. Today we are looking at a topic that is, well, it's as heavy as it is profoundly necessary to understand.
Yeah, it really is.
We're pulling insights and excerpts from a foundational text called The Long Shadow of Child Sexual Abuse. And I want to set our mission right at the top.
Right, the framing for this one is so important.
Exactly. Our mission today isn't to shock you, and it certainly isn't to drag anyone through unnecessary trauma.
No, not at all.
We are entirely skipping graphic details. There will be no descriptions of abuse here. Instead, our goal is to really dissect the lifelong psychological architecture of trauma.
We want to map out how those childhood experiences fundamentally rewire the brain.
Yes, how they alter our sense of self and shape the way we interact with the world, decades after the fact.
And if you are joining us today, whether you're someone who has experienced childhood trauma or maybe someone supporting a survivor, or honestly just someone trying to understand the deep complexities of human psychology, we are approaching this with the utmost respect.
Absolutely.
This is an analytical deep dive, but it is deeply anchored in compassion and emotional validation.
I'm so glad you brought up the validation piece, because before we even get into the mechanics of the text, I really want to address a massive psychological roadblock that the author tackles right out of the gate.
Oh, the resistance to even opening the book.
Right. It's this intensely protective resistance. When I was reading the introduction, the author quotes a survivor named Jenny Rose Lavender, and she kept facing this question from people in her life.
A question she probably asked herself a million times, too.
Exactly. The question is basically, why are you dragging this up now? You survived it. It's over. Wouldn't it be easier to just leave the past in the past?
I want to pause on that question because it is incredibly common. And honestly, from a purely survival standpoint, it makes total sense.
Really good.
We have this psychological concept of the sunk cost fallacy, right? You spend 20, 30, or 40 years expending massive amounts of cognitive energy building walls to keep those memories locked away.
Fortresses, really.
Yeah, fortresses. So the brain thinks, I've invested so much effort into not looking at this. Digging it up now feels like a dangerous waste of all that protective work.
It feels like stepping backwards into the fire.
Exactly. It feels incredibly unsafe.
But Jenny Rose's response to the text, it completely shatters that logic.
Mm.
She says, and I'm quoting here, why? Why? Because it has controlled every facet of my life.
Wow.
She goes on. It has damaged me in every possible way. It has destroyed everything in my life that has been of value. It has prevented me from living a comfortable emotional life. It's prevented me from being able to love clearly.
To love clearly. That is a stunning phrase.
Isn't it?
It captures the fog of complex trauma so perfectly.
Right.
Because what she's pointing out is the biological reality of trauma. Ignoring the past doesn't actually turn it off.
Right. It doesn't just go away because you weren't looking at it.
It just forces the trauma to operate in the shadows. The nervous system is still reacting to a threat that happened decades ago.
Which means the past is actively participating in your present.
Yes. It's dictating your reactions, your relationships, and your entire baseline of safety without your conscious permission.
And she follows it up with this realization that just, it hit me like a freight train.
What would she say?
She says that she knows everything she doesn't deal with now is just one more heavy burden she has to carry for the rest of her life. And she adds, I don't care if it happened 500 years ago. It's influenced me all that time, and it does matter.
It does matter.
Acknowledging that the pain is there, acknowledging the sheer weight of this invisible backpack you've been carrying is the literal, mandatory first step to taking it off.
But taking it off requires understanding how the weight is distributed,
Exactly.
And that brings up a really complex issue that the text delves into. When we talk about something like child sexual abuse, it's rarely just a single isolated injury that you can neatly point to and say, okay, that's the trauma.
Right. It's not a broken arm.
No, it is pervasive. It
Yeah.
seeps into the foundational concrete of a person's identity.
When I was reading this section on how pervasive this damage is, the author shared an analogy from another survivor that completely reframed this for me.
The magazine analogy.
Yes, the Highlights magazine analogy.
Yeah.
The survivor compared their internal experience to looking at a page in a Highlights for Children magazine. You know those hidden picture puzzles you'd see in the dentist waiting room as a kid?
Oh, absolutely. The ones where the caption at the bottom always says, what's wrong with this picture?
Right. And the picture is always this absurd scene. There's a bicycle hidden up in the branches of an oak tree. There's a banana just randomly growing out of someone's ear. And half the people are walking on the ceiling.
It's totally chaotic.
It is.
Yeah.
And the survivor points out that when you grow up with pervasive chronic trauma, So many things in your internal world are fundamentally disturbed.
So many foundational elements.
Yes, elements of safety and trust are completely out of place. So it's actually exhausting to ask, what's wrong with this picture? Instead, the whole landscape is so distorted that it's easier to ask, what's right with this picture?
I want to push on that analogy a bit from a neurobiological perspective.
Yeah.
Because it is so accurate to how the brain develops.
Walk us through that.
Well, when a child is born, their brain is incredibly plastic. It's taking cues from the environment to wire itself for survival.
Like a sponge.
Exactly. If a child grows up in a safe, predictable environment, the brain wires itself for connection and curiosity. But if the environment is a fun house, if the people who are supposed to protect you are the ones harming you, the brain prunes its synapses to survive the funhouse.
Wow.
The upside-down room becomes the baseline normal.
So the exhaustion survivors feel as adults isn't just emotional, it's a literal cognitive fatigue.
They are running a marathon every single day.
They have been living in that upside-down picture for their entire lives, trying to navigate it, trying to go to work and have relationships, just pretending the bicycle isn't in the tree. And that takes an astronomical amount of energy.
Which leads to a really common, tangled question I see a lot of people wrestle with. If the whole picture is upside down, how does a survivor actually know if a specific struggle they're having today, let's say, having a crippling fear of abandonment, is a direct result of the sexual abuse?
That is a very fair question.
Right. What if they also had a parent who struggled with severe substance abuse? Or what if they experienced severe poverty and emotional neglect? How do you separate the thread of the abuse from the other chaotic threads of a painful childhood?
The text offers a really grounding clarification on this. And it's essentially this, you don't have to.
You don't have to untangle it.
No. The reality of human development is that it is an interplay of hundreds of factors. Child sexual abuse is a massive seismic factor, but it is interwoven with everything else.
It's all baked into the same cake.
Exactly. If you have trouble trusting people, it might be the abuse, it might be the emotional neglect, it might be the alcoholic parent. Most likely, it is the combined allostatic load.
The cumulative wear and tear on your nervous system.
Yes, from all of those things reinforcing each other. The text gives the reader permission to stop trying to isolate the effects of the abuse under a microscope. The pain is real, regardless of exactly which childhood thread pulled the hardest.
That takes so much pressure off the individual to perfectly categorize their trauma.
It really does. It lets you just breathe.
But there is a specific dynamic regarding the abuse itself that the author highlights, and I found this fascinating. The impact of the trauma isn't just dictated by the act of abuse itself.
Right.
It is profoundly shaped by the aftermath.
Yes, the institutional betrayal. This is such a critical piece of the puzzle. The way the adults around the child handled the situation or failed to handle it dictated the trajectory of the psychological damage.
Can you break down the two scenarios the text uses?
Absolutely. The text contrasts two scenarios.
Yeah.
In the first, imagine a child who finds the terrifying courage to disclose what is happening to them.
Which takes immense bravery.
Immense. And if that disclosure is met immediately with compassion, with belief, and with swift intervention to stop the harm, the healing begins in that exact instant.
The intervention itself is healing.
Yes. The trauma of the event is still there, of course, but the child's map of reality remains intact. They know they have worth because someone fought for them.
But wait, are we saying that if the reaction is the opposite, if the child is ignored or punished, that the reaction can actually cause more long-term psychological damage than the physical abuse itself?
In many cases, yes. The text argues that when a disclosure is met with silence, or worse, when the child is called a liar or blamed for the abuse, the original trauma is immediately compounded by the trauma of total abandonment.
You are leaving a child entirely alone with an agony that is too big for their nervous system to process.
Entirely alone. The message they internalize shifts from, a bad thing happened to me, to, I am entirely alone in a dangerous world, my reality is false, and no one cares if I'm destroyed.
That secondary injury, that total severing of social trust, is what often leaves the deepest, most complex scars.
It shatters their compass. And because everyone's aftermath is different and everyone's baseline is different, the trauma manifests in wildly different ways.
Which brings up the danger of comparisons. We see this all the time.
Oh, constantly.
A survivor might look at their life and think, well, I'm the CEO of my company, I run marathons, I pay my mortgage, I can't be that traumatized.
But then in their intimate relationships, they feel completely paralyzed.
Exactly.
We absolutely have to normalize that scattered impact. Trauma damage is rarely uniform across the board. The author explicitly notes that you can be incredibly high-functioning, incredibly competent in arenas where you have control, like your career or academics.
But you completely hit a wall when it comes to the vulnerability required for intimacy.
Yes, the blast radius is uneven, but for others, the blast radius is so large that it feels like nothing was spared.
There is a quote from a survivor in the text that captures this specific heavy grief so well.
Please share it.
They said, "As far as I'm concerned, my whole life was stolen from me. I didn't get to be who I could have been. I didn't get the education I should have gotten when I was young. I married too early. I hid behind my husband. I didn't make contact with other people. I haven't had a rich life."
That is so raw.
It is. And then they add this incredibly painful realization. They said, "It's not ever too late, but I didn't start working on this until I was 38, and not everything can be retrieved, and that makes me very angry."
I want to focus on that anger for a second,
Yeah, let's look at that.
because society often pushes survivors to move past anger, to achieve this kind of Zen state of forgiveness. But the text seems to suggest this anger is not just valid, it is structurally necessary.
It is the anger of mourning a stolen timeline.
Exactly. Recognizing the delayed education, the years spent hiding, the missed connections, it is a profound grief process. Acknowledging that anger is vital because it means you finally recognize your own worth.
You are angry because you realize you deserved better.
You deserved a safe childhood. The anger is proof of life. Now, as we transition into looking at the specific ways this trauma manifests internally and externally, the author issues a very gentle but crucial disclaimer.
Right, the disclaimer about the lists.
Yes, we are going to go through lists of effects, but these lists are not diagnostic tools.
If you are listening to this and you deeply resonate with the struggles we are about to discuss, like the profound issues with self-esteem or emotional numbness, but you have no conscious memory of sexual abuse, or you are unsure, please do not force a label onto your history.
That is so important. Emotional neglect, physical abuse, or a chaotic household can cause these exact same neurological adaptations.
The goal here is not to force a diagnosis.
Not at all.
The goal is to help you look honestly at your life today, to get support for the pain you are absolutely certain of, and to trust that clarity about your history will unfold when your brain feels safe enough to process it.
So with that framework in mind, let's look at the internal world. How does childhood trauma fundamentally alter a person's relationship with their own identity?
The text starts with self-esteem.
It does, and to understand the damage, we first have to look at what healthy development requires. In a safe environment, a child naturally learns they have inherent value.
They have a secure home base.
Right. Which allows them to step out, make mistakes, and build confidence.
Yeah.
But abuse violently interrupts this entire mechanism.
It doesn't just interrupt it, it reverses it.
Yes.
When a child's physical and emotional boundaries are violated, their fundamental right to say no is stripped away. They learn they have zero agency over their own physical form.
From a developmental psychology standpoint, that creates an overwhelming, terrifying sense of powerlessness.
And here is where the psychological adaptation becomes incredibly heartbreaking.
Walk us through the adaptation.
Well, a child relies entirely on their caregivers for basic physical survival: food, shelter, protection. So their brains engage in this twisted protective gymnastics.
To survive the environment.
Exactly. If a child is being abused, particularly by someone in their inner circle, it is psychologically too devastating for the child's brain to accept that the adult is bad.
Because if the adult is bad,
The child is essentially living with a predator, and their survival is in immediate jeopardy. The evolutionary biology of attachment gives the child no choice but to maintain the bond.
they can't run away.
The child cannot fight or flee, so the brain has to resolve the paradox of depending on a dangerous person.
Precisely. So to maintain the illusion that the caregiver is safe and the world is somewhat predictable, the child's brain flips the script.
They turn it inward.
Yes. Instead of seeing the abuser as bad, the child internalizes the belief that they are the problem. They convince themselves that they are inherently dirty, shameful, or that they somehow caused the abuse.
They take on the blame to preserve the illusion of a safe world.
It is a brilliant, tragic survival mechanism.
But if we pull that thread forward into adulthood, what happens when a 30-year-old or a 50-year-old is still operating on the subconscious software that says, "I am fundamentally bad and dirty"? How does that manifest practically?
The text outlines several ways. It often shows up as a pervasive, inescapable feeling of being an imposter.
The imposter syndrome is so heavy.
Survivors might feel fundamentally different from everyone else in the room. They harbor this secret agonizing dread that there is something rotten at their core, and if people really saw them, they would be abandoned instantly.
Which fuels incredible isolation. And practically, it completely sabotages the ability to self-nurture.
How so?
If you believe you are inherently bad, treating yourself with kindness, taking a rest day, setting a boundary, or just feeling proud of an accomplishment feels completely unearned or even repulsive.
Yes, and this core belief of being bad drives people to extreme behavioral poles. On one end, you see a complete fear of success. The survivor cannot get motivated or accomplish goals because deep down, their internal programming insists they don't deserve the reward. But on the exact opposite end of the spectrum, which I found fascinating, you see the extreme overachiever.
The frantic compensation.
Exactly. Some survivors use excessive work, relentless achievement, and an obsessive compulsion for perfection to desperately outrun the feeling of inadequacy.
They are trying to prove their worth to the world and to themselves through accolades.
But because the internal bucket has a hole in it, no amount of external success ever actually fills the void.
That resonates so deeply. The exhausted overachiever running purely on the fumes of childhood trauma.
It's exhausting.
Now, beyond self-esteem, the text delves heavily into the actual emotional landscape, the capacity to simply feel. How does the trauma impact a survivor's daily emotional dashboard?
In a healthy environment, a child learns that feelings, even big scary ones like rage or profound sadness, are safe. They pass through like weather.
Right, they learn emotional regulation.
But an abused child cannot afford to feel the full extent of their terror, their pain, or their absolute rage. The text uses a really vivid analogy here.
The classroom analogy.
Yes, a child could not possibly sit at their desk and do arithmetic with the other second graders if they fully acknowledged the absolute desolation of what was happening to them behind closed doors.
So if they can't feel it, where does it go? From a neurological standpoint, we are talking about dissociation here.
Yes, exactly. To survive, to keep functioning, to eat dinner with their family, they have to build a dam. They learn to sever the connection to their own emotions.
And to add to that, the biological mechanism at play here is often the dorsal vagal response.
Can you explain that for the listener?
Sure. When the brain detects an inescapable threat and the fight-or-flight system fails, the oldest part of our nervous system hits the kill switch. It drops the body into a freeze or shutdown state.
It's a biological override.
Exactly. Heart rate slows, pain receptors are dampened, and emotional processing goes offline. The child isn't choosing to block the pain. Their biology is doing it to keep them from psychological death.
But the problem is, that shutdown state becomes a permanent trait rather than a temporary state. So when they reach adulthood, that severed connection creates massive emotional extremes.
They get stuck there.
The text notes that many survivors spend their lives feeling completely numb. They describe feeling dead inside, unable to recognize what they're feeling, and rarely experiencing simple, uncomplicated joy. The dam they built in second grade is still holding back the water.
But dams break, and the text points out the other extreme. Right, the flooding.
Yes, because they never had the safety to learn how to process emotions incrementally. When feelings do breach the wall, they come like a tsunami.
It's overwhelming.
This manifests as severe panic attacks, uncontrollable rage, crippling anxiety, and a constant agitated state of being on high alert. The survivor's window of tolerance for emotion is incredibly narrow.
They are either completely shut down and detached, or they are flooded with terrifying intensity.
There is no comfortable middle ground.
It's like living with a thermostat that only has two settings, absolute zero or a raging fire. And this brings us to a profound pivot in the text.
Yes, moving to the physical self.
This internal chaos doesn't just stay in the mind, it is heavily absorbed by the physical body. Let's look at why trauma makes a survivor's own physical form feel like a hostile environment.
This is perhaps one of the most tragic aspects of the long shadow. For an abused child, their body was the literal site of the danger.
Right.
Children naturally learn about the world through physical sensation, running, jumping, the comfort of being held. But when a child is sexually abused, they are taught in the most visceral, terrifying way possible that their own physical form is a place of pain, boundary violation, and deeply confusing sensations.
So if a child literally unplugs their connection to their body to survive the trauma, if they mentally escape, because they can't physically escape what happens when they are 30 or 40, do they just walk around completely disconnected from their physical reality?
In many ways, yes. The clinical term is a disruption in interoception.
Interoception.
Interoception is your brain's ability to perceive physical sensations inside your body. Because the survivor had to cut the cord between their mind and their body, they often lose the ability to read basic physical signals.
So they don't feel normal things.
The text points out that many survivors might not realize they are starving, hungry, or completely exhausted, or even in severe physical pain until they are on the verge of collapsing.
That makes complete sense. If you numb the pain, you numb the hunger cues, too. The dial is turned down on everything.
Everything internal is muted.
But ironically, while the internal signals are muted, the external threat detection system is usually dialed up to 1,000.
Absolutely. The body becomes trapped in chronic hypervigilance. The sympathetic nervous system, the fight-or-flight engine, is stuck in the on position.
They're always scanning for danger.
Survivors might startle incredibly easily at a loud noise or someone entering a room. Their muscles are chronically tense, always bracing for an impact that isn't coming. They literally cannot force their muscles to relax enough to feel physically safe.
And the long-term cortisol overload from that constant bracing takes a massive toll on the body's immune and digestive systems. But beyond just existing in the body, the text delves into how this specifically impacts the most vulnerable physical experience: sexuality.
It does. And the text handles this with deep care. Natural sexual unfolding is supposed to happen slowly, safely, and entirely on the individual's own terms as they mature.
It's supposed to be a safe discovery.
Child sexual abuse violently forces an adult's timetable and an adult's distorted needs onto a child whose brain and body cannot process it. Because of this, the survivor's earliest experiences of arousal or sexual attention become inextricably linked to feelings of intense terror, disgust, physical pain, and humiliation.
The wires get crossed.
Exactly.
The physiological markers of terror, racing heart, heavy breathing, sweating are incredibly similar to the physiological markers of sexual arousal. For a survivor, the brain learns that arousal is the immediate precursor to trauma.
It's a terrifying association.
So how does this massive confusion manifest in adult romantic relationships?
The text lists a wide spectrum of effects, all stemming from that core tangled wiring. Some survivors avoid sex and physical intimacy entirely. The risk feels too high.
They just shut it out completely.
Others might engage in it, but they dissociate completely during the act. They retreat to their mind, going through the physical motions while feeling entirely numb or even experiencing a state of hidden panic. Some endure terrifying flashbacks to the abuse while trying to be intimate with a safe partner.
I also want to touch on the confusion between physical intimacy and emotional needs, because abusers so frequently disguise their actions with false affection or grooming, right?
Yes, the manipulation is devastating.
Saying things like, "I'm doing this because you're my favorite," or "I'm doing this because I love you."
The child learns that enduring sexual use is the currency required to receive basic attention, love, or nurturing. As adults, this can lead to using sex solely to meet non-sexual needs.
Like trading currency.
They might engage in sex just out of a desperate need to be held, or to feel a temporary sense of worth, believing their value to a partner is purely physical.
And then there's the other end of the spectrum.
Right. Alternatively, because the abuse was a total loss of autonomy, some survivors swing the other way and need to rigidly, obsessively control absolutely every single aspect of intimacy in adulthood, just to establish a baseline illusion of safety.
It's a minefield. Navigating intimacy when your earliest blueprints were drawn by betrayal requires unlearning your foundational reality.
It takes so much patience.
And that bridges us directly into the external world. How does all of this internal damage ripple outward into how survivors connect with friends, how they parent, and how they relate to their families of origin?
Let's start with broader intimacy and trust.
The absolute bedrock of healthy relationships, whether it's a friendship or a marriage, is the ability to trust. And child sexual abuse is the ultimate catastrophic betrayal of innocent trust.
It really is. Even if the abuser didn't use manipulative words, the act itself shatters the child's foundational belief that the people who are supposed to protect them actually will.
So when that child grows up and tries to make a friend, they are not starting from a neutral baseline. They are operating from an expectation of eventual betrayal.
Exactly. The text highlights a very painful push-pull dynamic that emerges in relationships. A survivor might deeply crave connection and safety, so they cling tightly to a new partner or friend.
But the moment that person gets too close,
Or the moment real vulnerability is required, the terror sets in. The survivor's alarm bells ring, and they panic, shut down, and push the person away.
the fear of engulfment battles the fear of abandonment. And the author mentions this tendency to test people, right?
Yes, because the survivor's internal belief is, everyone eventually hurts me or leaves me. They will subconsciously repeatedly test the people in their lives.
How do they test them?
They will push boundaries, pick fights, or withdraw, pushing their relationship to the absolute breaking point. They're essentially trying to prove their own distorted hypothesis. And when the exhausted partner finally does leave, the survivor says, "See, I knew it wasn't safe."
It's a self-fulfilling prophecy. But what about the repetition compulsion, the psychological theory that we gravitate toward what is familiar, even if it's destructive? Why do some survivors chronically end up with abusive partners?
The text addresses this explicitly. For someone raised in a chaotic, abusive environment, safe, calm love feels entirely unfamiliar. And to the human brain, unfamiliar equals dangerous.
The brain rejects the peace.
Chaos, on the other hand, is highly predictable. They know the rules of chaos. They know how to survive an abusive person. So, tragically, they might repeatedly get involved with inappropriate, emotionally unavailable, or abusive people because they are drawn to the familiar neurochemistry of the chaos rather than the terrifying vulnerability of a safe, equal partnership.
The brain prefers the predictable over the peaceful. That is a hard truth to swallow.
It is deeply painful.
Now let's pivot to a deeply sensitive area that the text explores: parenting. I know that for many survivors, the mere thought of having children is accompanied by intense, paralyzing fear.
We want to validate that fear deeply because it is entirely logical. Our very first lessons about how to be a parent, how to discipline, how to show affection come directly from our own families.
Our first blueprints.
If your family was the source of your trauma, or if they catastrophically failed to protect you from it, you were entirely robbed of a healthy blueprint. You didn't get the modeling for how to set safe boundaries or how to nurture without strings attached.
So the fear is essentially a fear of psychological contagion. Am I inherently toxic? Will I repeat the cycle despite my best efforts?
Exactly. The text notes that survivors might feel deeply uncomfortable around children, constantly second-guessing every interaction because the line between appropriate and inappropriate touch was so violently blurred for them.
The doubt must be exhausting.
They might struggle to enforce basic boundaries, fearing that any discipline makes them an abuser, or they swing to the absolute opposite extreme and become fiercely, suffocatingly overprotective, trying to shield their child from every normal life experience out of sheer terror.
And some choose not to have children at all.
Yes, some survivors feel the risk is simply too great. And the text makes a point to acknowledge that for individuals who desperately wanted children but chose not to, out of fear, grieving that specific loss is a very real, very heavy part of their healing journey.
But I want to inject some light here because the text also highlights a profound phenomenon of post-traumatic growth in this exact area.
Oh, absolutely. This is where the resilience of survivors is breathtaking. The text points out that many survivors take that intense fear. They take the absolute crystalline clarity of knowing exactly what they don't want to do, and they use it to violently break the generational cycle.
They flip the script entirely.
They use the painful memory of what they lack to become incredibly present, fiercely protective, deeply attuned parents.
They channel that hypervigilance into profound empathy. They consciously build the safe sanctuary for their children that they never had for themselves.
It takes immense, exhaustive conscious effort, but it is entirely possible to rewrite the blueprint.
It is a profound testament to their strength. Now, speaking of the original blueprint, we have to look at the family of origin, the environment where the abuse occurred or the environment the child had to return to after the abuse. How does trauma alter the broader family dynamic over the long term?
Let's look at family systems theory for a moment. In a healthy family system, the core homeostasis is built on respect, honest communication, and mutual safety.
But when abuse occurs,
the entire fabric of the system distorts to accommodate the secret. The family becomes a system built on isolation, denial, and preserving an image.
And very often, to protect the abuser or to maintain the illusion of the perfect family, the system requires a sacrificial lamb. The survivor is cast in the role of the scapegoat.
The system decides that the survivor's reaction to the trauma is the problem rather than the trauma itself.
Exactly. The survivor is repeatedly told they are overly sensitive, that they are crazy, or that they are outright making things up. They are blamed for all the family's underlying dysfunction.
And even if the abuse happened outside the home, say, by a teacher or a neighbor, if the family denies it or tells the child their pain is an inconvenience, the underlying message is identical. Your lived reality is false and your safety does not matter.
I have to bring up a dynamic that happens so often in adulthood with these families. The intense societal and familial pressure on the survivor to just forgive and forget.
It's everywhere.
You hear it all the time. They're your parents. They did their best. Don't ruin the holidays. Just let it go. Doesn't society generally view forgiveness as the ultimate goal of healing?
I'm so glad you brought that up because the text completely dissects the weaponization of forgiveness.
Or weaponization of it.
Yes, when a family demands forgiveness without ever acknowledging the reality of the trauma, without any accountability or change in behavior, it is a devastating form of ongoing gaslighting.
They're demanding toxic amnesia.
They are actively invalidating the survivor's reality all over again, putting the comfort of the abuser and the fragile image of the family entirely ahead of the psychological survival of the victim.
So what is the result of that ongoing invalidation?
The result, very rightfully, is deeply strained, hostile, or completely estranged relationships. Survivors often feel physically ill, depressed, or completely unspooled when they interact with their families.
And sometimes walking away is the only choice.
The text validates that sometimes stepping away, implementing severe boundaries, or choosing total estrangement is the only mechanism left that can actually protect the survivor's sanity and allow them space to heal.
We have covered massive ground today.
Yeah.
We've gone from the neurology of dissociation to the shattering of the family system.
It's a lot to hold.
And I want to pause and acknowledge that for the listener sitting with us, mapping out this massive upside-down picture of their life, this might feel incredibly heavy. It might feel like an overwhelming catalog of damage. Where's the turning point in the text? Where's the hope?
The turning point is my favorite part of the entire text, and it shifts the entire paradigm. If you are listening to us right now and you are feeling the crushing weight of these lists, we need you to hear this specific truth.
Listen closely to this part.
You have already lived through the absolute hardest part of your story. The abuse itself, the isolation of childhood, the terror of having no agency that was the hardest part, and it is in the past. You survived it. You survived against completely formidable, terrifying odds.
You made it to adulthood. You are sitting here engaging with this material. That alone requires immense cognitive strength.
And here is the profound reframe the author offers. The exact same trauma that caused this damage inadvertently forged incredible, unbreakable inner resources within you.
The survival mechanisms.
Yes, the survival mechanisms you built as a child were not signs of weakness or pathology. They were acts of sheer, brilliant adaptation.
It took immense intelligence.
It took immense intelligence and grit for a child's brain to invent dissociation, to build emotional walls, to hyperread a room's emotional temperature to stay safe. Every single survivor listening to this possesses an ocean of psychological strength.
We have to reframe the pathology as brilliance. The hypervigilance that exhausts you today is the exact superpower that kept you alive when you were small.
Exactly. The text ends this section with a quote from a survivor that perfectly captures this pivot from victimhood to fierce autonomy. The original quote uses some colorful language, but the defiant spirit is what matters.
What is the core message of the quote?
In recognizing her own survival and the sheer magnitude of what she endured, she establishes a new, unbreakable boundary with the universe. She basically declares, no one is ever going to mess with me anymore.
I love that. It's the reclamation of sovereignty. You survived the fire, and now you realize you are fireproof.
That is the ultimate power of looking honestly at the damage. Acknowledging the ways the past has shaped your present is not about wallowing. It is not about throwing a pity party. It is the literal, practical blueprint for what needs healing.
You can't fix what you refuse to look at.
You cannot fix the engine if you refuse to open the hood. Looking at the effects is how you pull your power out of the shadows and back into your conscious control.
Which brings us to the most practical part of our deep dive today. How do you actually start opening that hood? How does a listener take this heavy, complex information and turn it into an actionable step toward healing today?
The author provides a very specific, very gentle writing exercise to help you do exactly that. We want to offer it to you as a tool. It has two distinct parts, and the sequence is incredibly important.
Okay, walk us through the first part of the exercise.
Step 1, find a quiet, safe space where you won't be interrupted. Gently write down the ways the abuse or the trauma is still affecting your life today.
Just lay it all out.
Look at the blueprint we discussed. What are you still carrying in terms of your self-worth? How is it limiting your intimate relationships, your ability to feel at home in your body, or your peace of mind at work? Write down the ways your life is still pained by what happened to you. The goal here is to simply honor the absolute truth of that pain without judging it or rushing to fix it.
That takes immense courage, to just put the pain on paper, to look at the upside-down picture and say, this is real, it wasn't my fault, and it hurts. But you cannot stop there, right? That's only half the ledger.
Right. It is crucial that you immediately follow it with step 2. Turn the page and write down the strengths that you developed because of surviving that environment.
The inner resources.
Yes. Think about the incredible skills it actually took for you to survive your childhood. Did it force you to develop superhuman perseverance? Did it make you incredibly empathetic and able to read people's needs in an instant?
Did it force you to be self-reliant?
Did it forge a supreme, unbreakable sense of self-sufficiency? Did it make you a fiercely protective parent?
Look at the skills that kept you alive. And look at them not with the shame of the trauma that necessitated them, but with immense, undeniable pride. Those skills are the armor that got you through the war. They belong to you.
Exactly. Wear that pride. You earned every ounce of it.
Yeah.
And as we prepare to sign off today, we want to leave you with one final provocative thought to mull over on your own time.
We covered a lot of walls today.
We spent a lot of time today talking about the walls you built to survive, the emotional dams, the hypervigilance, the fierce self-reliance. What if those very walls, the ones that sometimes feel like they are trapping you right now, what if they are made of the exact same stones that you can now consciously dismantle and use to build your own sanctuary?
The same stones.
The profound intelligence and strength it took to build the defenses is the exact same intelligence and strength it will take to build a beautiful, safe, connected life. You already have the materials. You have always had the materials. You just get to be the architect now.
You get to be the architect now. What a powerful, hopeful truth to end on.
We want to address you directly one last time. We see you. You are heard. Your complicated, messy, deeply human feelings are entirely valid, and most importantly, your healing is absolutely possible. Please be exceptionally gentle with yourself today. Thank you for trusting us with your time, and thank you for taking this deep dive with us. Take care.